We don't need to go backwards in time to recreate those institutions because they were awful harmful to women. We have to go beyond surface level conversations. I think we have to create these moments where we can have true friendships that go beyond the surface level. That's how we get out of this.
Hi, and welcome to DADennial. My name is Mike Trenk, and as you can figure, I'm a dad. I feel that's how a lot of other podcasts start, and those dads will tell you what their day's like. They'll probably talk about what it's like being a dad today too. But along with being a dad by day, I'm also a mental health counselor by night in my own private practice. As a clinician in private practice, and one of those dads sitting in pick-up and drop-off lines for school, I wanted to share what I see in this ever-changing world. So together, let's create the best version of being a millennial dad. Tonight, I have a special guest. His name is Shannon Carpenter. He's an author, a humorist, freelance copywriter, a podcaster himself, content creator. Says he creates engaging content that pulls the reader forward, which I will agree with because I wanted to talk to him about a couple articles I had found online that he had worked with and interviewed, and had some great anecdotes and great things about it in these articles that I think really hit home, especially for DADennial. So I wanted to welcome you, Shannon, to DADennial Podcast. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here. Glad to be talking about dad stuff. So excited.
How old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
No, absolutely not. So I have 3 kids. I've been a stay-at-home dad for 15 years. So 3 kids, a 17-year-old who just got accepted to college. So that's happening. I have a 16-year-old that is going to get his license probably next week. And a 10-year-old who, let's just say, keeps me honest. So I have 3 kids. My wife, she works in advertising, and she does that. And I stay home and write and take care of the kids. It's my job.
That's awesome. How long have you been writing? How long have you been doing writing about dad stuff?
The funny thing is I've always written since I was a kid, right? It was always fun for me to do. Before I became a stay-at-home dad, I worked as an investigator for Adult Protective Services. So I was investigating elder abuse against the aged and disabled. And then I became a stay-at-home dad because it was the right choice to make for my family. But even during that time, I just wrote. I wrote about my life, I guess one of the original dad bloggers from way back then, 15 years ago. And so when my youngest was about to go to kindergarten, I took a step back, and my wife said it. My wife was the one who pushed this. She goes, when are you going to stop messing around and write for real, write professionally? She swore more when she said that, but she had that belief in my writing, right? And it was a good chance to take a swing at the fences, right? To take a swing at your dream. Always wanted to be a writer, always wanted to be a novelist, always wanted to do those things. So that's what I did, and that was about 6 years ago. And things just kind of blew up. Got an agent. The book, The Ultimate Stay-at-Home Dad, came out. It's been published everywhere from CNN and the Atlantic to everywhere else. So, yeah, it's really good. I think it's interesting to see the voices of fatherhood come out, and I'm glad to be part of that.
Yeah, no, I am envious in a way because that is kind of where I think of the podcasting and what I do for my own side writing of blogging, things like that, to be where you are. So that's awesome to hear, and that's great of the support from your spouse.
Yeah,
that was so supportive to kind of probably give you the nudge that you maybe needed to kind of, all right, if she's on board, we're going for it. That's awesome.
And not only was she on board, she was pushing it. She was like, you need to do this for you. And when you have that kind of support, I think as a father, it's just it's hard to describe how important that is.
No, I can definitely feel it. I definitely understand that. Even the podcast thing too, of my wife just kind of supporting it. For me personally, the whole thing of my kids are younger, they're only 6 and 4. I have 2 boys, but going through COVID, I think there was just that kind of boom almost of myself included. Of, wait a minute, I have something to say here. It's not just me as a dad, but I'm also a licensed counselor, and I work primarily with dads. I used to work a lot with families and kids, but having 2 kids, I kind of stepped away a little bit from those sessions. But that really kind of made me want to share what I see and anecdotes that I use and things like that. So that is awesome. I'm great to hear.
Absolutely.
So I assume with 3 kids in those age range at Halloween must have been a range from a 17-year-old probably not doing anything or going to a party to a 10-year-old probably, you yourself and even enjoying maybe one of the last times that might go out trick-or-treating, if at all.
Actually, I had a thought this year with this. So my family loves Halloween, we always have. And so, my 17-year-old went out with teenagers, with her friends, and they were safe and good and everything was great. And my 16-year-old did something like that. My 10-year-old, I went with just him and me. He said he didn't want to go with anybody, just want to go with me. And I was like, oh, that's sweet. And then I'm going around talking to other parents, things like that, realizing that my days of going trick-or-treating are numbered. I've gone every year for like last 15 years or something like that. I really like going with the kids when we're out there. I think it's fun. And I was out with my son. I was like, oh, this might be the last time. I might get another year, maybe 2 out of him, but I don't know. So I enjoyed this one, I think, a little bit more in the past because I think it was more present that this is not going to last for much longer.
Yep. No, I say it because even my 6-year-old is kind of knowing of, I got a couple of years left probably with him. He's still he's full into it now. It's full Mario this year, but I kind of know of the progression of where it's going to go. So really trying to, be in the moment, be present, and enjoy that time with him right now.
I'm doing something with the older kids. Even my daughter and I have started watching scary movies since she was like 14. And so the month of October, we build up to this night. And then when she gets home, eventually we watch a scary movie together, and my youngest is starting to do that with us. So I'm trying to replace an old tradition with a new tradition to still have that maintain of that relationship and that time with them. That's what I'm trying. We'll let you know.
No, that is a great way of looking at it. It's a great thing to do. I always kind of see it as in kind of the psychology professional sense here of as you kind of grow from the parenting role, slowly kind of easing into like that friendship role as you get older. Like you still always be the parent, but it's not as parenting as the 10-year-old, right? As you get older, and so kind of start building those things that's like as you remember as an older adult, not just not a kid. Now it's 17-year-old of and that's something you can carry on through 20s, 30s, and beyond. So that's
absolutely
So Shannon, I just did my Let It Out Now, and I think it's kind of curious if you had any Let It Out Nows or anything Halloween related, or it could be anything related. If you had anything you wanted to bring up this evening before we get into the articles.
Sure. Actually, I'm writing an article now for The Atlantic, and you'll see in a couple of weeks or whatever. But it's this idea: is the world ready to see men as primary caregivers, right? And it's something. It was such a simple question that I asked at the beginning of this, and it turned out to be way more complicated than that. It was a lot deeper than that. The more I looked into it, my own experience over the last 15 years of being the primary caregiver and what has changed, and it just kind of grew and grew into this article. And so right now, that's kind of the shout that I'm doing, right? I'm trying to find the yes or no answer. It's not a yes or no question, even though I want it to be. It's complex, and that complexity makes me angry at times and makes me happy at times. But it's a difficult question to answer. So that's my shout today. That's why I've been shouting literally for 3 weeks, trying to figure this question out.
So I'm curious now, as the dad side and the therapist side there, because I have my thoughts on that personally and professionally. But I'm curious of what are you finding out?
I think that it's not written about as a dad, as the primary caregiver. There's virtually no writing about it all that much. The only thing you can really find is talks about paternity leave, right? And the difference between USA and Finland and Denmark and Sweden and Germany and all these other places. But what bothers me about that talk is it doesn't go far enough. We're fathers long after paternity leave, whether it's 10 days or a year, which is what they get in like Denmark, right? So the question is, with men as primary caregivers, you start at the talk of paternity leave, but that's not where you end. But any writing or any discussion after that is pretty non-existent. So I'm either on the edge of it or I'm wrong. So I don't know. We'll see.
I would say, for what it's worth, which isn't worth much, I guess, right now, but sitting in my office alone at 8 o'clock. But I think that this is something actually I've talked about in a few of my podcast episodes. And actually it's kind of one of the things that sparked my wanting to create this DADennial thing that hopefully will create its own book and lectures, as I did at Home Dad Con and things like that, of like, you know, that there isn't anything really on that like we're creating a new template, that it is.
We really are.
Yeah. And it's so multifaceted in that it isn't just the word or the term of like, you know, you're the main caregiver. You're not just like you're dad that does mom stuff and does everyone's stuff. And
does everything.
And when it first was hitting me was when I had my first kid, of past that paternity time of like, all right, now it's 6 months, 7 months, 8 months in, and I'm going to a coffee shop and I still get, oh, that's so nice, you took a day off and get to spend time with your kid. And like, no, this is just Tuesday. What are you talking about? We're in the library next.
That's what I do.
We got a full schedule here. It's just 10 minutes for coffee, then we're off to the
I know.
read time, and then, you know, we got applesauce at 12 o'clock. We got cleanup at 1. We got full day ahead. And I think from even some of the episodes that we've talked about, someone uses this, just pops in my mind trying to remember the context of it, of, you know, how it all kind of draws in, but like Tupperware parties and how that's multi-generational. We go back to our grandmothers going to Tupperware parties, how they had that support, how that was like just a thing of like, you're a mom, and that's, you know, they knew then of like that loneliness epidemic was a thing. And that's, you know, one of the things that made Tupperware parties, and like, oh, we're going to go to Suzanne's house. And, you know, sell Tupperware, but, you know, have a few drinks and hang out and just catch up and just, you know, take a deep breath. I think that's where it becomes more multifaceted of like, there is no male Tupperware party. And I think, you know, maybe it goes to one of the articles we can start getting into, but the loneliness epidemic of, I know I struggle with the fact of, all right, I have friends, but, you know, none of them are stay-at-home dads. So me trying to share my experience is like, you can go talk to my wife. She does that. I'm out doing sales. So it gets harder and harder as the years go on of like, you know, it took me a while to even get to the point where, you know, that thing at a party, wherever you go and meet someone new, was like, oh, what do you do? And for me to say stay-at-home dad was just that tripped me up every time. I had to kind of do my own cognitive behavioral therapy of like, wait a minute, that's what I do full time. And like somehow I had like make it sound neat for me, where I'm like okay with it, where I'm like, well, I'm a dad by day and a therapist by night. Like that's like some like Batman-y kind of like, sounds cool, but it's really
I know,
not.
like you're putting a qualifier on it. That's what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Yeah, and it just makes me, you know, makes more sense to not just myself, but of like even use it today at an appointment of like, oh, what do you do? Like, I'm here for a foot appointment, but it's like, what do you do? Well, I'm just, you know, drop my kids off, so I have the 2.5 hours till I have to do the next thing, kind of thing. But I'm also a therapist at night. It's like, oh, that's where you get the out of like. So it's always that difficulty. Yeah,
it is. You know, with the male loneliness epidemic, when I wrote about that for CNN, that came about because I was seeing these things, people talking about it, and it was people who were making fun of what men were going through, like the pain, right? And I don't like that. I think that's punching down to me. I don't think we need to take pleasure and pride in someone else's hurt. That's not what I want to teach my kids, and that's not who I want to be in life. And so that's where that actually came from. Because you know, I wrote the book, The Ultimate Stay-at-Home Dad, to give guys a community, to give guys a roadmap on how to make friends, how to succeed as a stay-at-home dad or as a primary caregiver without some of the difficulties that I had to go through 15 years ago. Because when you're talking about putting a qualifier on what we do for a living, I've done that. I think every stay-at-home dad has come through that difficulty of owning what we do, right? Truly owning it. And that's some of the first advice I give to any stay-at-home dad is don't make excuses, just own it, right? Mm-hmm. But it's hard to say and harder to do. And when you have people around you, when you have a community around you that supports you, it becomes way easier. And so when I was writing about the male loneliness epidemic, it kind of stemmed from some of that. It's not just stay-at-home dads who are lonely. It is all men. Like, we are having a problem right now of finding these real connections with each other, things that maybe we've had in the past that we don't have anymore. And so that's kind of where that article came from. You know, that's why I wrote that, what I did. Yeah.
And I think just kind of touch on the article here where, you know, even says of like, that may view deep relationships as not masculine, thus further isolating yourselves. Only 48% of men reported feeling satisfied with friendships, which I see. I see an epidemic of that professionally, and and I think this is where it gets really multifaceted and kind of doesn't get you in trouble, but just gets of like that, like you never really think about it. And this is just my perspective of that. We normalized, kind of go back to that Tupperware party thing. We normalized that for women, but for guys, it's like, and the therapist side is just of like, so we have kids. So like, if I get to go away, right? Of like, well, guys don't go away. Your dad never went away. Dads never went away. Like, no, have a guys weekend. But then it's like that thing of, well, you're just going to go get drunk. Or you're just going to go. It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to take a break. Yep, I have those friends.
Take a break. You want to be with friends.
Right. And some of the friends that have trouble and kind of fit those older stereotypes. This is, it starts to get that more multifaceted. Like, no, I'm just there for a break. Like, I'll hang out with them, but like, I can't keep up. Like, I'm not that stereotype. Like, I'm here more for another reason. Right. And it's like helping my wife too, because even she would say initially, it was like, well, my dad never went away. Like, it's just like still weird, still different. Of like, so it's like, if, you get time, like you go away on girls' weekends, and that's fine. I'll take care of the kids. And it's just this new world, new kind of place that we're in of breaking through of, and how I kind of call it is like the next step of Me Too. Right? We've kind of gone through like, have this platform now of like, here's what's bad. And we've gotten rid of these people that are, this is what the old kind of guard looked like. And as we kind of step forward of like, here's what the new guard looks like. It's that acceptance, understanding of like, this is what we want, not just saying it, like what we want men to be and to how we want, the next generation of kids to men to be. It's now kind of going along with that too, like just kind of like being a part of it, right? Because I feel like there is that isolation then of guys trying to figure it out on their own, where if anything we should have more of that support, more of that cohesion of, hey, moms and women have been doing this for generations, and knowing how to find ways to not fight loneliness and create friendships and support, and to have those things that we need that guys have lacked for a long time, for so many generations in the modern society. So I think it's really just trying to figure out what is that next step, and that template that even I think it was, go back to like initially how this all started. One of the things I put in DADennial is, how did this start? Well, I gave you one example. The other big example was after paternity, after my wife went back to work full time. And I was definitely, aware of the symptoms of like, I know I need support. I know I'm not doing well. I'm catching myself and making depressive kind of mistakes. And she was part of a mom's club in town. And she's like, well, I'll just ask them like when their next playtime is, when they're going to meet at the next playground. Message them and gets back and she was, I remember my wife's face. I can just always picture it of, I can't believe it. They're like, it's got women only, no guys. Like, you're just going to a playground and they've met you and they know you're there. Like, like if anyone understands and, is, a great guy, like they know you, like, but when you get to the playground and that was where we're all done. When she's like, my wife was, in the sense of, well, I guess you have to create it yourself.
You do.
I have to figure out some way to begin this. And to the next point too, of like something I'd love to create is like something that is like, I know that, the Stay at Home Dad Network has their weekend, but creating even something more of, things to do weekend, right? Of like having it as support as these conventions do, but also having it as like new hobbies, new things to do, other things added to it.
Well, that's the thing with men. And so as we talk about this, I think I interviewed Dr. Richard Reeves for that article, for that Mental Illness article. And he wrote a book called Boys and Men. And he's the CEO of the Boys and Men Association, and a former, I think, fellow at the Brookings Institute, right? So dude that's given a lot of thought to this. And he brings up some very good points to kind of hit for me. So we talk about our fathers and maybe how they connected. So those institutions that our fathers had access to have been eroded for good, not for good or bad, and we don't need to go backwards in time to recreate those institutions because they were awful harmful to women. And that's important to remember, right? And I've talked to him about this because we don't need to demonize one of the genders, vice versa, to help the other. Both truths can be true about we both have issues and problems. So we don't want to go backwards, which means we have to reinvent, like you said, the institutions that maybe help us now. And that's the difficult part. Now, this is not a problem for women to fix, because you can certainly be lonely in a marriage or lonely with a girlfriend.
Right.
This is a problem that men need to take the lead on, take some responsibility for. And that's what I think we all want to do, right? So the question is, how do we do that, right? And you're creating the DADennial stuff here. There's other organizations that are creating their organizations to get that day-to-day kind of support. And it's usually built around doing something. That's how men bond a lot, that you can break down those walls. I interviewed the head of Movember one time a while ago. Movember is a leading advocate for men's mental health, right? And they have a big men's mental health is the month of November. And what he said struck with me is we have to go beyond surface level conversations. That's what he said. Yep. And when I put that together with what I've read with Dr. Reeves and some other people, I think they're all right. I think we have to create these moments where we can have true friendships that go beyond the surface level. That's how we get out of this. That's how we add the friendship to other men. And that's what I hope I'm helping there. We'll see.
I see that's the nail on the head, and I see it as, to create that. I guess the hardest obstacle for that to happen in the psychology world is the learned behavior piece, kind of what you're touching on there. Of like, this is how we've done. This is what we know. And speaking for myself personally, it took me till probably my late 20s, 30s of fully understanding of like breaking down that of like what's different. Like, how do I be a partner? How do I be, the best husband I can be? How do I be the best dad? That's kind of going through these next phases of life. And as we see the world around us changing so rapidly, and the norms kind of becoming more progressive, becoming more of, all right, this is what society is now, right? Not going backwards, of continuing to go forward, of more women in the workforce, or more women have high paying jobs. It's healthcare is a big issue too. So if the partner
well, I think you look at it, and men are slow to change. That's another one of the issues here. We are slow to change and create these new institutions. And even you're talking about healthcare, we talked about Dr. Reeves suggests he has a program called HEAL. That's what he's advocating for. Men are in health, education, literacy, all those things. Those places where men could be caregivers and actually help the world and help ourselves, right? And that is another way that we can redefine who we are as men. Because I think the biggest mistake we make is how we define masculinity. We allow other people to define that for us. And that's a huge mistake, I think, because no one gets to comment nor tell me what my masculinity means to me. It's very personal. I decide what it means to be a man. And for me, that means staying home with my kids and, going to see the world's biggest ball of twine. I know what I'm doing over here, so I'm having a good time. Yeah. But I think allowing other people to define who we are is a mistake. And I think men need to get out of that, because that is what we do. So,
No, I concur with that. I goes back to that learned behavior of breaking that cycle. That's the hardest thing. That's the thing I see so constantly of.
It's tough. It's breaking that cycle of what it means to be a man. That's really what it is. And you said it, it's the learned behavior.
Yeah.
No, so that's a hard thing to change though, right?
That's what I see a majority of, right? Because the first step in all that, and as I'm writing my DADennial book, as it's slowly becoming chapters, the first page, the first thing is just awareness. Like, that's it. That's the first step. That's the first of anything. Is when you're not aware, you're just going through life of like, well, this is normal to me. This is what I grew up with. This is what I know, and this is how I should behave around my kids. This is how in society, until you catch yourself, you're like, wait a minute, I want to change something. It's something not right. Something happens, and then you come talk to me or talk to someone. But I think you were saying too, what I was going to say was the education, literacy, people in my profession. This is my second kind of career. I was initially, wanted to go in TV and radio, and that was not very lucrative. I could not find many jobs, and worked in insurance for a while. And I was like, I gotta do something else. And I ended up going in psychology in my 30s and going back for my master's and being where I am now in my 40s. But I didn't realize at the time that our education system is so geared of men kind of going these one tracks, where there's so little men in teaching, so little men in therapy. I mean, I working with kids, because when I first started doing my master's program, I was working in local schools. I didn't think I'd do that, but it was the director. I was like, there's no men. they will like,
No.
these kids will look up to you and you just play Uno and have a good time. Like, all right, I'm in. I'm playing Uno for 45 minutes. Let's do this. And that's
Well,
where
it's more than
started.
that, you know. Yeah. So Dr. Reese points this out in his book too, that there's only about 11% of men that are elementary school teachers. 24% of men are just teachers in general. And this has been a growing trend that men have been getting away from teaching, for example. And that's hurting our sons, it's hurting our boys, because what it does is it shows a lack of role models for them to look up to. And a lot of boys respond better to men. And a lot of boys need more men in their lives. Maybe they don't have a dad at home for a myriad of reasons, right? And so there's studies about this. And Dr. Reeves, he's got the better stats on that. But we need like a national program to get men into those caregiving activities and roles to help ourselves and help our sons. You know, it's imperative. It really is. And there's our federal funding to increase jobs through gender is already being done. There's billions being spent on women in STEM, as there should be, right? That flip side of the coin, they've been pushed and kept out from societal expectations as well. It's not right. It's not good for them. So the idea of funding to get men into teaching, the groundwork is there, right? We can spend more and get better results and get better role models for not only our sons, but for other men, and I think in the community, to see men in caregiving roles. I think that's important. Yeah,
I was just going to kind of end of saying by working with those kids, I was able to. You were right. Of so many young men, young boys when they would saw me as their therapist, were just so excited. I could see their eyes light up, like, oh, I finally get to talk to a guy. And it would just sometimes just be, it's obviously more, but you sometimes be asking questions. They're just asking about guys, the teenage stuff that they're maybe embarrassed to talk to their mom about, that they just want to talk to a guy about. And
or a female therapist. Absolutely. There is a definitive proven benefit to having like male therapists. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. No, I will always look back fondly on those many years of working, because it helped kind of speed up breaking that cycle, right? Like I could teach them and they were more aware and they were more wanting to change at 14 and 15. So they're already going in at 18, 20, you know, way ahead of like where I was. And that made me feel great. Now, and to the other spectrum of working with men our age and older, they're coming to that awareness stage and they're kind of trying to unravel all the learned behavior for 30, 40, 50 years plus. And seeing seeing your eyes light up in a different sense of, oh, I get to talk to a male. Like, all right, here's some things that, and I've had this conversation on my podcast in a cultural episode of a friend of mine that was like, I wanted, a Spanish therapist. I wanted someone that kind of spoke, kind of knew my world, kind of knew what I was about. And being a male was even extra plus, it's like a double plus for him. Like,
it does.
So just hearing it too, like, it is something. I guess I can see that and relate to that. And that is something that hopefully, education, hopefully therapy. I mean, I know just the brief summary of, I was always intrigued of like, what happened to male therapists? You think of Freud, you think of the guy with the beard, not me with the scruffy beard, but like an actual, like, your beard, a nicer beard. Yeah. And you think of the guy on the couch with the Freudian kind of thing. And like, what happened to the guys? And there was from the specific article, but there was many article things written of it kind of changed in the 70s and 80s when it went to the HMOs and what you could make. And I interviewed a couple of older therapists in my internship that they were making great, and they had to get rid of their, taking insurance because they weren't getting paid half of what they were getting just a couple of years before. That they had to go without taking any insurance, and like that's bonkers. And that's a situation that I'm in. Of I couldn't, taking insurance was just getting to be too hectic, getting to be too much, and they do so much of pushing the therapist in general just to get you done with in the least number of sessions as possible. So it's
and then move on. Yeah, agreed.
Right. Yep. So that is. I would love to have more males in education and therapy and in these arts and creative societies and parts of the world. And I always encourage it. I always like it when I talk to people like you, other people that are the creatives, kind of like that different artistic mindset, that think you do have to kind of break the mold to kind of think about it, and maybe being a stay-at-home dad and all these things kind of help utilize that side of your mind and your brain to kind of want to see what tap into that side.
You know, to be a stay-at-home dad when I first started, I had to reinvent myself, right? And that took a shift within my own head. But once I did it, I got really good at doing it, right? I took ownership of my life. I took ownership of my role with my kids. So when it was time, when my youngest was going, about to go to school, and I was re-identifying myself again, I was trying to think, what am I now, right? That big question that we all ask ourselves. Well, I'd done it once already. I told my wife, it's like, how many times do I have to reinvent myself for this? And I'm like, all right, I'm a writer, but it gets easier. It's like anything. It's practice, it gets easier. The first step is always the one that's hard, but the rest of it's all right.
Yeah, because more comfortable becomes more, that's the new normal, right?
Yeah.
You're creating a new pattern. That's like, all right, this is how it's going to be.
I'll make my own normal. That's really what it comes down to.
I think something we talked about earlier that just kind of dawned in my head of, being present, right? It's a big piece of being a stay-at-home dad, being aware. I think that, because I feel like more so generally as a male that you're kind of always sped up of like, what are you doing next? Where are you going? This kind of thing, whether it's school, sports, work, overtime, whatever, you had to be doing something else. I always felt that kind of need. And being a dad, like things just slow down to a halt. How do I slow my mind to kind of be here with my kid, being present? And so one of the slides I had in my DADennial lecture there, back at the Stay-at-Home Dad Con, I couldn't find the poster, but I had found these posters. It was just one of those days of just being with my firstborn, and it was a picture of a bee and a picture of a present, and I put them both in both their rooms. So it's really amazing to see my 6-year-old is very aware of it, knows what that means. Will sit and can meditate, can sit and get in a pose. He's practiced that, he's done that, and knows how to box breathe, and knows how to do all that stuff, which is and that's helped me too. If I'm in that state of whatever mind that shouldn't be in, and I see that poster, it's like, oh, okay. And it's gonna be as simple, as small as that to kind of keep that routine, keep that that going of like, all right, be present, keep that mindset of today's the only day they're gonna be this age. There's not gonna be a day like today. So just remember,
I agree,
and I think that forward.
That's hard with men, I think. For so long we've been on the outside of the family parenting world, right? Where we've sat and watched, and that's what society was, the value of us. Our value was what we could bring home. And on the flip side of that, I think we've been robbed of those moments, of those present moments, as you say, those lifelong core memories and experiences that we have not had a chance to do because we've been elsewhere. We've been at work, we've been at a job, we've been at something that someone else expected us to do. And, there's a balance that we need to find there between working and then being present for our kids. And not just for them, but I mean for ourselves. Like there are moments there that I have had that, they're just one and gone. I'll never get them again if I wasn't present. And I think that's what, for men, that's one of the shifts I would like us to see. We talk about the mental load of parenting, and so mothers typically take most of the mental load of parenting, right? And they're the recipients of labor, is what we call it, and they're absolutely right. Fathers take on the majority of what I call financial caregiving. It's a term from Dr. Linda Nelson in her book, Myths and Lies About Fatherhood. It's a fantastic book. But it's the recognition that fathers do work a lot outside the home and they miss those moments. So how do we balance that, right? That's the key. How do we share the mental load? Not because it's so it'll be equal, because you can't reach equal, but you can reach equity, where you're playing to people's strengths and each feels valued and each feels balanced within their own life. And that's a very, very hard thing to get to. My wife and I have been together for almost 30 years, since 1995, right? So married for 22 of those years this year. But it took conversations, real conversations, to get to where we had equity in our marriage. Even with her working and me and staying home, we still We still divide it up. Every year we have a new meeting where we what I call is basically we rewrite our job descriptions, including mine. And that's how we get the equity in what we do. So yeah, it's hard.
No, I like that idea. I think that's a piece that probably should touch on more is, you know, being a stay-at-home dad, it's the kids is obviously the majority, but is kind of redoing, kind of creating a new template of what a marriage, what a relationship, what that looks like. Because I'll be honest with the first few years were kind of tough of that mindset. As I said, like, wait a minute, I still have to be a therapist, because the first few months I was not. And I would just stay at home. I was like, I need to go back doing something for myself, because you know, I ended up being that dad that, you know, every time I did go out with friends was like, I want to show pictures of my kids. And like that's still not accepted of, like, you know, just because you're just being that emotional attachment, and then trying to understand all that and unwrap that. And then it took a while for me and my wife of figuring out not just my own insecurities and my own, you know, what I needed to kind of hear and kind of say to help each other kind of like, all right, I'm still being a part of this. I feel like I'd be a part, but like, you are doing not just mom care, but you're still doing lawn care. You're still doing other things. You're still doing other parts of the house that.
No, you know, that, caregivers is genderless. There is no gender in caregiving.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that she brings up, or we talk about regularly, is of that it's interesting, I guess, from her vantage point of like that, you know, there's still things that are just kind of, in her mind at least, male and female. I mean, they don't have to be, but it's still like, well, you take care of the lawn. You still, you know, had a way to put a new doorbell of like, well, you said you can do it. Like, I know I could probably do it, but it's genderless. But, you know, it's just that thing, like, seems that comfortability, that kind of normalcy for even her. Like, that's just
it is. You're playing to strengths, and that's something you really do. You play to strengths. Right. Even with my wife, I do a lot more of the physical labor. That because she kills my flower garden when she's out there. I don't like that. So I'm like, no, you can't touch my flowers anymore. But I play to her strengths as well, right? She handles a lot of the paperwork and the insurance issues, because, you know, we have kids, we have insurance every which way from Sunday. So she handles a lot of that kind of stuff as well. So we play to her strengths, we play to my strengths. It's just however we define to do that. And I think that's the key, though. We have to talk and communicate and redefine what that looks like. And just do it, whether people judge you for it or not. It's okay. They're going to judge you anyway. So what are you going to do?
Right. What do you feel about, I don't know, in the, one of the articles about men are not born stoic or emotionally isolated. Like, you know, they're kind of like trying to teach your kids of how to kind of show those emotions, right? I mean, talking, I feel like, is the end product of being able to kind of share and show emotions through growth. Like for myself, like my 6-year-old, I feel like is very good at that. But my 4-year-old, he is, I mean, I think it's more genetic, because every time I ask him, I'm like, I don't even ask like how your day is, give me a word. I mean, just give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, basic therapy of like, you don't need to talk, just tell me. He's like, nope, I'm not talking until I get home. Like, just very rough, very just kind of old manish. I give him his time and give him his space and try to work with him. Like, hey, let's do some breathing. Let's, you know, maybe just tough day tough day in the sandbox. You got, you know, we'll do box breathing. But nope, don't want to do that. Just want to sit in my room and just kind of doodle or whatever. I'm like, all right, that's fine too. If you're letting it out your own way, just trying to tap him in. Like, no, you're letting it out, because he's very much into like, nope, not talking, not saying anything, just going upstairs.
It's somewhere like that. It is. So the article you're talking about there, I like the line, because it's one of my favorite lines I've written. Men are not born stoic; they're learned. Right? You're learned that way. And it's about a book from Dr. Flayes, is her name, Dr. Shelley Flayes, nurturing boys to become better men. Right? And I like the book a lot, because what it really talks about is how to reach our sons emotionally, right? And help them deal and navigate with their own feelings throughout their own life, not just in the beginning, but forever, right? And how do we do that? And the first thing she talks about is modeling, and you're doing it now. You're talking to your son. You're showing your son how to communicate. You're not pushing, right? That's a lot of times that's going to shut people down. And that modeling, I think, is one of her ideas that I completely believe in. I think it's a great idea. The next thing that she talks about, the one I really, really like, she calls it overheard praise, that our kids need to hear us praise them to other people. And then they'll be more open with us. And I found that to be very true in the 17 years I've been a dad. And I'm very conscious when I do those things. And then other times she talks about meeting kids where they're at. And that really just means creating a space where you're there together in some sort of activity. Whether you're sitting on the couch or you're playing baseball outside, it doesn't matter. But you have those quiet moments that eventually lead to conversations. And that's how we teach our boys to express themselves, because you've got to have a safe person to do that. They got to be able to express themselves without ridicule, without feeling bad about it. And we have to encourage those things. They can still be tough. They can still be strong. You can be all the masculine things, but you can also be well-adjusted and kind and show empathy, right?
Yep.
And those things are not seen as masculine. There's been studies about that where empathy is not seen as masculine.
Right.
And that's disturbing, but that's the truth of what American society has taught us. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you're doing it right. Just the whole openness and giving them space to actually talk.
Yeah. No, it's a challenge at times for sure, but it's great by trying to teach them emotions and that it is okay, that it gives that template, that learned behavior. And something that I hear a lot from dads in general is, that in between of like, well, I can't do anything my dad did because I have to throw that out because I can't say, touch, do anything that he did. And I don't, I don't know how to discipline. And that's why I have to kind of use that reframing and that kind of behavioral aspect of it of, well, you're not disciplining, right? And then they kind of go like, well, I don't want to be their friend either. And that's where the tricky part becomes of, well, yeah, I think the psychology, like how I hear it in the sense is like, you revert to like what you know, right? Like, so like being a dad is like this like scary kind of figure almost of like, I can't, when it gets home at 5 o'clock, oh crap. Yeah. To like, well, I don't want to be that. So what's the other thing I know? I know how to be a friend. I know how to like make a friend. I know how to nurture a friendship. Mm-hmm. And that's where we I feel like some dads fall down that rabbit hole of, no, you need to find that new way. You need to find that kind of in between of
exactly. There is an in between,
right? And the kind of reframing that of like, it's not discipline. It's just this is parenting, right? You're trying to be a parent.
So and you're always going to. I know my dad's group. We call it correcting behavior. Right. That's really what it is. It's correcting behavior and setting boundaries and expectations. And all of us are going to lose our temper at one point or another. I think the kids are fantastic about pushing our buttons more than anybody else. Right. I like to start with positive reinforcement until I have to go negative reinforcement, because I think as a parent, you do have to eventually set hard boundaries with hard consequences. It doesn't mean you have to be a jerk about it. Right. You don't have to yell at anybody, but you certainly have to have consequences if they ran into the street and you told them no. You're right. And now there needs to be consequence for those kind of things, because you don't want that bad behavior coming back up later. Now, as they get older, yes, you do that. But I have found that positive reinforcement works better on my teenagers more than anything. Right. With my teenagers, they are discovering the world. They're discovering what's going on. And it's very easy for them to shut down and shut you out. Mm-hmm. And so if I do positive reinforcement by creating moments where it's comfortable for them and they can eventually talk to me, that has been a better thing, that we've been able to guide them through decisions they have coming up. Now, it doesn't mean they get off scot-free. Like, you still get in trouble if you don't do your chores, right? But I do that different. I find them now. I don't yell at them. I say, all right, you didn't do your chore, you owe $10. And I make them pay. That's a thing. That's what we do. But now it makes it more personal to them. Yeah. So, it's being a father's never boring. Every time you think you got it, you have to change up.
But I find it fascinating, and you're a great example of how I see it, it's the years of being a parent and kind of instilling those values and emotions and constructs of communication, to where when you get to those later teenage years of, it's still always be a parent, you're still doing it, but now you're like, positive reinforcement is better. Now you're starting to create some more avenues of friendship where you have those kind of like, we watch a movie on Halloween and things that are going to kind of go forward. So it's that shift, but it's taken those first 16 and a half into 17 years to get here.
It took you to get there, I know.
Right. And then even, I was going to add too, of even when you do make a mistake, and I obviously do, or yell or get upset, and to be honest too, I think that's important for kids to see too. If I'll go to them like, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that. I was upset. I need to go do some breathing. So I'm going to go upstairs to my room and kind of show them, setting that example of, understanding too, because I feel like that was for me personally, more of a personal thing of like, I never saw that. I never saw like,
No,
I should have gone too far. Like, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have done that in the heat of the moment or whatever kind of thing. And I say too, like, when you're with someone every day for a long time, things are going to happen, things get, under the cracks there here and there, and that's okay. And allowing them too, like, hey, there's days where you're just going to be annoyed and pissed off for whatever reason's going on in your life. And
that's okay.
Deal with that when that comes. Yeah, that's okay. And that's just accepting that too. I think that's a big part of it too, if not just always having to be moving on.
No, and you see that's the power of that modeling you're showing right there, the power of saying I'm sorry. That's a really big deal, because the kids need to see it when we mess up, and they need to see our failures and mistakes and how we deal with them, because that is how they're going to deal with them in the future. So if they see us take ownership of our failures and our mistakes, the hope is they'll do the same when they're older. Now, once you take ownership of those failures and mistakes, you can put corrective action in place to fix it. And that's what we really want to get to, right? So when you say I'm sorry to your kids, this is what I should have done, you're showing not only the vulnerability of it, but you're actually showing how to fix it. And that's the more important part.
Yeah. No, I think we have touched on a lot of great topics, a lot of great insight, and a lot of great writing, and I look forward to the Atlantic article in a few weeks, and hopefully we can continue this conversation as DADennial podcast kind of goes into year 2 next year, and keep touch of different articles and different things. I'm sure we'll probably be crossing paths as the future kind of entails here in the world of dadness. And I want to thank you for your time, and I appreciate you coming on. And
Thanks for having me. I love being here. I love talking fatherhood stuff. I could literally do this all day. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the future, man.
Thank you very much.